Welcome everyone to another Let's Talk video. If you're new to this channel, for 20 years I built Linux distributions here with Xorg Linux, which is now T2 for the last 15 years, and just released the most important, huge and 25 architecture supporting Linux distribution here for T2. And I mentioned that the other day, so what you've seen on this video already recurrently, regressions, right? Stuff breaking. And yesterday I said I wanted to talk about, actually I wanted to live stream or something else, but now I see this breakage again. And I quickly wanted to summarize that, because I think this is really a shame, right? So what happens? Recurrently, the Linux kernel people, but also others like Xorg, and in this case, of course, Xorg, people constantly change stuff and break it, right? So only already one of our themes, maybe we soon make a t-shirt, and the only constant is change and regressions. And I find this disappointing, unnecessary, unprofessional, and yeah, certainly not helping people playing along at home to use their hardware, right? Because, so what is the issue, right? It's broken, and I said this before, in my opinion, after the 30 years of open source revolution, in my opinion, we should have been in a state where everything just freaking works TM, right? I thought actually 20 years ago this was a goal of even Free Software Foundation, GNU was not Unix, and eventually Linux and Xorg, which of course 20, 30 years ago, neither Xorg, which was x386, and the Linux kernel were as big as they are now, right? And with all those 30 years and all those thousands of developers, although Xorg people would probably say we don't have 1,000 people, it's only a handful or two, okay, fair. But especially in the case of Xorg, previously x386, you might say, yeah, but the future is Wayland, and it's like, yeah, exactly. The future might, some people say Wayland, and most people use that already. Okay, fine. But even then, why do they in 2022 need to break this stuff, right? And it's not only ATI we can, so what happens here is a usual change of headers, change of code of APIs. And especially you will see later also, let's touch that. I know that already because I saw this the second time I built that, and I was actually thinking what to do with it. Like, yes, it is vintage and retro, although you could argue ATI is still somewhat usable. It's also, I think, SES and Tried and probably Cyrus, maybe. We will see in a second. And especially as this code is supposed to be vintage, right? Why, in the name of God, why on earth? Why do they not have something? Why do they not spend their efforts and time and resources in just freaking Wayland, right? Why do they need to break all the good old-fashioned drivers for other people, like maybe poor people might like it. Also for vintage retro, right? They just want to play some Doom or Quake on original hardware, and so you drive people to Windows, installing some Windows 95 or ME or XP or whatever, or just freaking DOS, when it could just work. Also, to summarize this, the problem is people without a good reason, right? Just because they can, always in the name of cleanup and maintenance, right? Fun fact, you Xorg developers, you make yourself more work, well, except you don't care and let all the stuff broken, right? Like, so you will see this XF86 RAM deck. I guess they removed this from the main Xorg server thing. I mean, why in 2022, or maybe it was December of 2021, whatever, why in the name of God, why the heck, after 30 years, why do you need to touch this freaking header now, right? Breaking all those vintage drivers. And I want to see further, the Linux kernel does it also to some degree, although there we have seen the Spark, the other live stream last week, right, for 15 years, I think, the Sun TCX frame buffer was broken. Also previously, I got donated the Sunblade 1000, which at the time was a freaking expensive fast workstation. And I tried to use T2, and I mean, at least to their advantage or to their praise, at least it was still booting, which is, at least if I only have 4 gigs in there, I think if I have 8 gigs or so in there, then it doesn't boot. But fiber channel was broken, right? I debugged this also 8 hours previous video, right? I need to debug 8 hours of stuff that previously was working, right? So in the Linux kernel, recently also P3, yes, who cares about the P3 except us and other fans and stuff? But why do they constantly need to touch it, right? There is no good reason. All those people, Linux kernel and Xorg and all the others of big software at Apple and Microsoft, right? in the name of cleanup and refactoring and stuff. And what's often the thing, they just, like the Linux kernel, they change some init, like often they had previously like alloc and init or stuff like block layer or multi-queue and stuff. They just change tiny stuff, right? Which in a commercial operating system like Windows, you would never change because you have stable APIs. Maybe you would change it between Windows 3, 16-bit stuff and Windows NT or stuff. Or you might eventually have new APIs or other stuff for Windows XP or Windows 10 or stuff, but like not break it in on a monthly basis like the Linux kernel people do now, right? And in the Linux kernel, often it is like totally pointless. Like sometimes they remove an argument, like with the sun stuff. So often, like not only the sun, also other stuff like multi-queue and like basically block layer, everything, file system. They constantly need change APIs. Yes, so, I mean, you could argue design an API that it is amazing from the beginning. I understand that's not always possible. I also design stuff and then I later figure out it's not amazing. But maybe the people also should, I mean, if it's otherwise working, like what is the point of changing, what was it, also ALSA or multi-queue or other disk helpers, where they combined init and alloc to some new function like _new or similar stuff, just from the head of my, and like here, why touch it in 2022, right? Why? I mean, it's barely different, or sometimes Linux kernel removing an optional argument that was never used. It's like, this was previously we had like stable trees, right? Now we have like, normally you would choose like improvements and have like in 2.4, 2.6, 3.0, 4, 5, like one, at least 90%, 99% stable APIs. You only cause work, right? So instead of just letting this vintage and retro piece code in peace, like maybe fix bugs and stuff, no, they need to break it, right? And as I mentioned, they only make themselves more work for, and also they ruin. I also find it really shameful and depressive and disappointing, and not a homage to all those people. Imagine all those Xorg stuff, all the drivers, they were developed in the 90s, in the 2000s, by people where it was really freaking a lot of work. They had to disassemble and reverse engineer Windows drivers. They often didn't get specifications. They had to reinvent all those wheels and so on. And often with obscure and multiple RAM decks and stuff. And for what? That 20 years later, it could be bug-free. It could be the pinnacle of operating system design. We could showcast the open source of we have stable foundation that supports everything we ever reverse engineered and implemented. But no, we need to delete headers, change APIs, break stuff in the name of cleanups. And it's not even the future that is a Wayland desktop. They could have, I don't even see the point, because just for the sake of change, for the sake of cleanups, they just break it and they leave it here. I checked it even, right? Here, Xorg, and this commits. There are some commits, but this commits here fix spell working. Thank you very much. Acceptable. And so this is the ATI which failed previously. We could check glint. So fix spelling wording table. So it's nothing like they fixed it here already. Maybe I could install a local version, or maybe I could actually I could diff the Xorg server and maybe put this back. Maybe I will, although maybe they remove functionality there, who knows. Or is it, could this be, no, we install Xorg server and no, we should actually install both. We could actually double check. But it's also a thing that in my opinion they factored out Wayland for the maintainability. It's like, what maintainability and stuff? No, you have two trees, Wayland and Xorg server, and one is bit rotting and one you even break for no good reason. And this is by the way not a run. This is like a professional. I even try to keep cool and present this here somewhat professionally. I personally could like, I could curl as right. I could just like, yeah, you know, whatever. Do you, after 20 years, me with our tiny little Rock Linux and T2 Linux distribution, keep trying, just releasing 25 architectures where everything works. I could also just say, like, YOLO, whatever, do your shit alone. Eventually I have enough. Enough is enough. Then it doesn't work. And increasingly, of course, I do it, right? I will soon start my microkernel and new graphic subsystem, because obviously this choice doesn't work for me. Xorg every year more broken, and Wayland not supporting vintage hardware anyway, and so on. And the craziest thing of all of this is that Xorg server, many people might not even know that, the Xorg server has already a degraded experience for old vintage stuff, because not only have they deleted all the legacy stuff, because once upon a time we had theoretically even S3 Verge, but or even Voodoo, 3D FX Voodoo, through de-acceleration, right? The very first, most people probably don't even know that, right? One of the very early 3D accelerations was S3 3DFX Voodoo support. Later it was Smartrock's MGA Millennium and stuff. And so this 3D code, I said this before, this is already long deleted, right? Maybe 5+ years. So this is already degraded, right? We had once upon, so maybe the design wasn't fully secure and it's like, yeah, unfixable. But certainly nobody would use that today in a secure environment. So instead of, you have some 3D acceleration for vintage and retro stuff, or some light gaming or whatever, or people in third world countries that have nothing else, at least something. Now they have nothing. And the other thing is, the other experience was also already degraded, because the original XAA, X-accelerated architecture that was used for 2D acceleration, for solid fills, for Bresenham lines, for copies and such, was also already deleted some years ago. So where previously with those cards you could have had, when they were new 20 years ago, you had good performance, or at that time outstanding performance with this acceleration of accelerating 2D stuff like drawing text and windows and stuff, that is long deleted, right? So with this vintage stuff you had already, like, not only that modern software runs like a potato with all the bit rot and so on, binary, with all the bloat, not bit rot, with all the bloat, that everything becomes larger, and certainly if you have a 1 GHz Athlon with such a card, it was already slow, but it was even slower because just in the name of cleanups and maintenance burden, it's like, yeah, maintenance burden, they removed that 5+ years, the XAA original X accelerated architecture for this kind of 90s kind of first generation graphic accelerators. So the support was already minimal on, like, yeah, also for no good reason. I don't even quite sure code complexity and stuff, but like, seriously, it was there, it was working, even if it was not the most secure, because YOLO people didn't know how to write C code in the 90s or so. It still was there and usable. And instead of allowing people to either have fun with vintage and retro stuff for their hobby playing long term, or in poor countries, in developing countries that might not have anything else, sure, maybe nowadays they have cheap smartphones and stuff, but there's certainly, I mean, also in industrial economies, people run, at times ATMs run with 20-year-old hardware and IBM OS2 Warp stuff, or cash registers run even still DOS or whatever, and it might even be useful even for some companies to use more modern open source stuff on a cash register or something to upgrade for new interfaces. I mean, theoretically, you don't need more than a 486 or Pentium and a bloody cash register, right? Or some advertising display of what sort. Theoretically, you could, of course, run this for 30, 40 years if you don't need higher resolution graphics and stuff. Sure, you can recycle it and e-waste it and stuff, but also people like to tinker with stuff, like think you find that, like, it's a 12-year-old and tinker with stuff, and it's like, yeah, it's broken, it's not there, right? We can continue here. There are a couple of more. You see ATI was slightly different, Glint is that header. I need to check if it's probably, I don't know how much code, like probably there was code in there, but or did I probably touch that? What have I left that I wanted to touch that? But that is basically the summary, right? My continuation of this disappointment. And some people on some Linux news sites always applaud it, but honestly, you have not run this code, right? I mean, first of all, your latest epic Threadripper or Intel Core i whatever, doesn't matter. People always on news sites like code bloat and stuff, like, no, you don't run this code, right? If you are running Wayland, you are not running this code. If you're not running Wayland and you're running the Intel driver, you also did not run this code, right? So what does it instead of not having other people support for their hardware, it totally doesn't matter for you, for your performance, and even maintaining, right? they only create more work. The split of Wayland and Xorg server even caused one or multiple shared files that we had to patch away previously. I was like, yeah, they split the stuff for the maintenance and stuff and even cause more work. I mean, they do it so that it's not fully working without conflicts. And the other thing is, even that, right? They touch the stuff, means they only create more work for everyone, right? They don't do the work because obviously there is no release, right? There's some random commit that don't even fix something. And I checked it already. The last release of those are, of course, here 5 years ago. Also previously with ATI, which was 2 years ago. And this is, yes, it's vintage. It's not the latest and greatest. Theoretically, you could even plug in those cards in like GPU shortage, right? Yes, it's getting better, but when I had my first Pentium, I also continued to run an either VGA kit for some year or two because I didn't have more money. You can plug halfway decent cards in some last 5-year-old system, but now it doesn't work anymore in many combinations. And this ATI also was 2 years ago, right? And yeah, even Novo, do they have a release for that? Even Novo is broken apparently. No. And it's like, how should we work with this? But I not only do I need to get everything to work and test and stuff, I also need to do there. Yeah, 1 year ago. I don't make this shit up here. What is with Novo? This is not even like totally garbage stuff, unless you run Wayland, obviously. But what's missing here? Is it also Ramdeck or some struct has no member slave? Yeah, this was slave. Was it similar to ATI? It's like here, it's not even, it's ATI, which also had some vintage Radeon and Novo. And yes, I get it. Some people run Wayland. Also, on all the vintage stuff, obviously, I don't run Wayland, and probably you can't even run Wayland unless maybe through some extremely crude and slow hacks. But it's even Novo, where for years we were like waiting and begging for open source NVIDIA support, which now also doesn't build. Let's see, where are the commits? And do we have here at basic build test? Yeah, I mean, they add here some basic build test. I mean, why do they even bother with that? I wonder if that could maybe fix that. We could probably see that on a first glance. Hello, click there. Does it or does it? Maybe this is not a. Yeah, no modern UI. I don't even see where you can click secondary slave. Actually, yeah, that looks actually like it could fix this. But even if this would fix this, I'm not sure if this was an ATI. Maybe not. Maybe we. I mean, this looks simple. So they renamed slave to secondary in modern language. So they just renamed slave to secondary. You can't make this shit up. I mean, I'm all for inclusive naming and stuff, but some stuff is also silly. So they here this compact ATI, and this is also the thing, right? Good that I see this. I wanted to mention this and welcome everyone. This is also they have, because for years they changed the APIs, and I would also argue that if we already knew for 10 years that the future is Wayland, why did they have the last 10 years, as you see here, each driver is already shipping with this compact API header, and where they have all those defines. What they do with this macro defines here is renaming all those API stuff, because the upstream Xorg server had already so many of such API cleanups in the name of refactoring and maintenance and stuff that all those drivers already only compile because all of them come with this API defined boilerplate to support slightly different versions of Xorg server. It's like, why even freaking touch it for this minimal changes, right? And besides, it's already vintage and retro, the whole Xorg server stuff. Why even still continue breaking it in incompatible ways? This is also silly and crazy. So, yeah, it's and also in this case they even have this change, but they didn't release. They don't even when they sometimes do the minimal extra effort of patching some stuff, they don't even release a freaking new version, right? Maybe this too, need to check. But yeah, leave in the comments below. I'm so disappointed. Also, this is just fun freaking header, thank you very much. For me, this is, yeah, I mean, I obviously want for education and hobby and stuff work on my microkernel with a from scratch graphic subsystem, like a directly memory map, maybe even like not only supporting vintage and retro because we love it, but also obviously not a network protocol and directly. I wonder how much crazy performance you could get out of a lightweight, directly memory mapped window manager, even on vintage and retro hardware. Cheers. But this kind of stuff, I wonder, I totally don't understand the whole development process here, right? This is somehow, in my opinion, this is a strange open source illness of ever changing the stuff for very little benefit, right? I mean, this is just a rename here apparently from slave to secondary, and it's like seriously. And this is even only in there. I mean, this is only a rename for fun because it is there. So this is not API visible because only the type is. And I slightly wonder, do they even freaking use it there? Or that is a little bit strange unless... But yeah, but it's an open source illness that is doing more harm than good, in my opinion. Leave in the comments below what you think. This is also why I do this YouTube channel, not only to try to explain this inner workings and insights of open source community and changes and stuff, but also to point out, to be an alternative voice to those people whose big open source celebrities who, like those Xorg people and Linus Torvalds and stuff, who only promote their view of cleanups, and hey, we have 1,000 developers and SED to fix all it up. But in reality, they constantly break stuff, like the Sunblade 1K fiber channel. This was also only endiness substitution stuff, right? This was there changing for change and cleanups and stuff, and then breaking, or ALSA driver, right? And Xorg. It's always the same, and I don't see the benefits, especially for this vintage code. But leave in the comments below. What is your take on this, right? And so now, because they can't even release that, they don't even do the extra effort with all the change to release it. I need to import here those patches, which also somehow this also doesn't. Copy and paste also doesn't work every time as Wayland. That is a hotfix. How do we call this? Hotfix API or so. Hotfix, so that data can potentially rename that. For me, it's set, right? For me, I question. I mean, I already know that most people do not use T2 head, even freaking builds. But maybe then also release a freaking Novo version there. Maybe we can do the same for, what was the first? Maybe we tried to do the same for ATI. I think it wasn't. Well, the problem is when I send this upstream, you could say, I mean, there it is upstream, but the ATI, if it wasn't in there, let's see. I think I didn't see it there, but maybe I overlooked that. We can quickly. I don't think this should be it. I think this. Oh, this is also strange. The problem is, if I do this for ATI, for me it's fine. It might not take also. Yes, it's the next RAM deck, right? I don't get why they had to remove the RAM deck stuff to break all those drivers. It is completely silly. For this, I really have no words. This is, and I even have a couple of S3 cards, and I understand most people don't run it in production nowadays anymore, but some people could still. I outlined this. Vintage and retro fun or developing countries. and I so don't get this breakage. And not it. It's not even the maintenance, right? They create more work for themselves. I mean, they had to do the change. And another RAM deck. Yeah, so all the vintage drivers are broken with that. Maybe I look into if I can easily revert that. I have the feeling maybe not. I understand T2 is not yet the most popular distribution, but maybe we are getting there now that we have some Slash.news there, previous video. And maybe people wanting to use vintage and retro hardware. For me, it was always fun to support this other architectures and with that some surrounding hardware. But if other people, other VIP open source celebrities only make our lives harder, eventually I also get enough, right? For who do I even do that? Should I also stop it? And yeah, let's sorry, just I think my throat got a little better. Those for those who subscribed to this post-COVID shit. I think from the last 10%, I'm not the last 5% of this. I think I sound already better and don't host that much. So this was ATI. Let's try if we can pull something similar. The thing is with Upstream, people sometimes ask me, do I send this stuff upstream? I sometimes did, like even I even fixed GCC for PowerPC cell, right? Or actually no, for G5, I think for both the G5 and cell. And they didn't even apply it, right? I think I have 2 prominent patches somewhere else also. I mean, why should I even, it costs me more work, right? To like professionally list it upstream. It costs me additionally 15 to 30 minutes, like just finding my login or registering a new login for whatever. I had an Xorg bug thing. Maybe they now use GitLab. Not sure. Maybe I need to register there again, or I need to send it upstream mailing list or whatever. First do the work and then, like usually it doubles, if not triples the work, just sending an email or doing the web stuff, right? You need to formulate the stuff, you need to look this stuff up, and it's not like 5 minutes, right? And usually if I rush it, then like rush it in 10 or 15 minutes, like the Spark or Linux kernel, right? I rush it in 10 or 15 minutes, and then not only do I often regret it, I send it, and then later at home I see the email, oh darn shit, there is a typo in there. Like if you rush it, of course there will be typos, right? And then you, oh darn, this English grammar there is really not the most amazing. It's like, yeah, and then like those kernel people like, yeah, thanks for the patch, but can you do this and that and also send it there? It's like, I mean, can you not just integrate it in your flow and be happy that I did it? It's like this rewording and differently, and I'm not the maintainer, sees that, and it's like then just T2 is the only freaking distribution where everything is just working TM. Let's see if we copy the package Xorg. So this was this is hotfix API 2. So this will of course not apply, but maybe we are lucky and we can partially remove it, partially reuse it, at least for these are actually to at least the compat header and do the other manually. So okay, this was slightly, yeah, whatever. At least reuse that one, and obviously this stuff we still need to do. Let's see how that goes. What do you have there? Welcome everyone. So rename needs to, this is not even Linux, because this is Xorg, but yeah, this is actually, I wonder if those, I mean, beside those people from slave times, I'm not sure if maybe if this triggers you, if if you're a person of color with this history, and you're interested to talk about this, let's talk. I'm really happy to hear that. For me, I mean, even in Germany, we are constantly reminded of the crimes Germans have committed in the Second World War and other such things. And I would argue maybe it would actually be better to be reminded than cleaning that. And I mean, it's not even like the code worth committing those crimes, right? And I would wonder if that technical term was used there of slaves, master and slave versus initiator and responder, primary and secondary and stuff. Does it really matter for people? I mean, I would argue or think that the real actions and real history or like problems in the society are much more important than how APIs are named. Sure, in new APIs, maybe avoid this, but APIs that are there, is it really that much worth than having a museum-like reminder of the terms that were used at that time? Leave in the comments below. So this applied, I think. Then let's ATI. Hello, did I? Because this was so fix file has no slavelets came as. Although is that another one? Maybe it is actually another one, or is it drawable? I have the feeling we have actually there are more. Actually, no. What? Let's give up on this shit. So there are more of this stuff. I'm not doing that today. There's even more. Yeah, this is just silly. For me, this is breakage just to break it. I mean, this is kinda like really. For me, there is not really a technical reason. And this rename, even society, it's like I don't really agree to that, but if you're an affected person, leave in the comments below. It's more like, especially the other changes, right? The other changes were like removal of exa. This has nothing to do with clean washing the language. To me, this is more like, if I would be the creator of x386 of Xorg, I would be proud to support all those hardware over the years. I would, like with T2, right? I'm proud to support 24 plus, 23 plus architectures and would work on supporting even more and keeping it tested and working. I don't get this mindset. For me, the only thing I see, like for me as a maintainer, I would never intentionally delete it just to delete it. And this XAA, no, not XAA, yeah, XAA, not exa, delete. And this is more like, especially the exa delete. For what? This has nothing to do with API cleanups, maintenance burden. It's like, yeah, but no, we don't have this code anymore, right? We don't have isolated 2D. So for me, this is, with big mega corporations, with Microsoft and Apple, you would think they intentionally cripple old support to get people to move to new stuff. And it doesn't make sense to open source, except maintenance burden. And so for me, this is, as crazy as it is, leave in the comments below. For me, as a computer scientist, as a coder, to me this is more like crippling this support just to cripple the support, just to declare Xorg dead because barely something is isolated and works anymore and just use Wayland and stuff. It's kind of just similar to systemd, right? Enforcing systemd into everything, otherwise you can't use it anymore, right? Just because they want to press their political open source support agenda through. So this Ramdeck stuff, we could diff it, maybe we do while this builds, and as always, leave in the comments below what you think. As I fully outlined that, I can only repeat myself, it makes me only very sad after, and I grew up in this, 1996 getting to Linux, 1998 getting to Linux distributions. And I remember the early days when there were often no drivers. Accelerated X drivers, then 3D drivers, then Wi-Fi drivers. I remember I brought the first no-name, I probably still have it there, PCMCA Wi-Fi card for my no-name laptop. I remember that there was not a driver. Actually, I asked this Taiwanese, I think, company, they even sent it to me. I probably still have it somewhere. Whatever that no-name card was. So I even had them, but even then this was, I think it was even, was it fully open source? I'm not even sure if it, no, I think it wasn't fully. I think there was some binary object in there. Anyway, I remember having some cheap no-name Wi-Fi card and it wasn't, all the others also were not. I remember when much more often than today we had no drivers, and it only makes me sad, this artificial deletions. Sorry for this, it's probably more coffee. And yeah, this is also a recurring theme why we can't have nice things, right? This is, let's diff this stuff and see how much RemDeck stuff they removed there. It probably should be that one, probably was the last one. And we can check that tag here. Wait a second, there of not driver, then we need to check which, is it Xorg server? X server probably. Tags, we have tags we have here. 20s, actually there were more in between, I don't know, of which we didn't switch immediately. 21 one, okay, we had also, yeah, so there is more in between unfortunately, but we can still do it like that. Yeah, there are quite some. Let's see what they've done there. Is it full removal? No, there's still some RemDeck. What do we have here? Modes RemDeck TI. It's not totally gone. What do we? No, this is totally gone though. So yeah, they removed it completely. I mean, for what? Just because Novo and Radeon don't need them. Also, your white space changes, right? More white space changes. Yeah, so they removed that. Unless they have a XF86 RemDeck compatibility package. Probably not. Yeah, we could, as a custom thing, restore it and patch it back in there if we like totally want it, or we could. It's probably easier to patch it back in there than creating a custom library. It probably did not happen with the factoring out of, I mean, maybe it did, but is it in, because they now have also libx CVT or something? Also, do they, yeah, so they factored out some video mode timing library, but that is not in there. Yeah, so this is, sure, it is, these are vintage drivers. I totally get it. I just don't get why we need to ruin our own decades of open source hardware driver and support code. Yeah, it's another sad day of this. that's it for this video. Looking for your comments, and I hope you learned something. And have a good Sunday otherwise.